Hey everybody, you're about to listen to the cast and crew of the Starship Tempest to talk about Strange New Worlds Season 1. Consider this your spoiler warning, because there ain't a damn thing unspoiled in this discussion.
Okay, greetings everybody. We are back with our second Tempest Talks mid-season break episode. Today we're going to talk about, as we're recording this, Strange New Worlds just wrapped up with its season finale, 2 days ago as we're recording this. So yeah, we're going to talk about our thoughts on Strange New Worlds. The whole season one, from the first episode, the premiere, up to the season finale, which just aired the other day. So who's got thoughts?
I love it.
I thought it was good.
I love it. I love everything about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's, I got so many thoughts, but why don't we start all the way back at the beginning. I think we collectively had a pretty interesting discussion at the very beginning when we first saw the opening that was dropped prior to the release of the first episode. And we all had some. I have come full circle on my opinion, but if somebody else wants to start off, because Travis, I thought you had a really good point about the opening when it first dropped.
Oh no, we talked about that so long ago.
I know.
I remember not being super enthralled when I first saw it. I thought that the special effects in it looked very video gamey as opposed to like realistic. It's a way that television has moved in a lot of ways. I mean, they're using literal game engines now, so it's not that shocking. But the opening just felt a little weird to me. The first time I watched it, I had a specifically bad reaction to it because I guess the version on YouTube that I watched it on did not have the proper sound upload, and so none of the bass was actually in there.
No, that would be different.
So like when it first starts, it does this, it does the intro and it kind of leads into it, and then it starts the sort of like big orchestral part. And the first time I heard it, it's just like some strings and stuff, and there was no drums or bass or anything. I was like, this is the weird, and like it finally got there, and I was like, okay, I see what they're doing, but like it just feels very off. And then when I watched it again, I heard those, and I was like, okay, I still don't adore the theme, but I thought it was fine. But yeah, it was the sort of video gamey look. Also, I think they were going for slightly more like realistic shots, like trying to sort of simulate a camera of someone actually trying to shoot, because there's some like imperfect shooting in it. Like some of the frames look a little weird, like they aren't perfectly composed, which if that's a theme that you're going for, cool, but it just took me out of it a little bit. And particularly the thing was Pike's delivery of the opening line. And something sounded off to me about it. And then I went back and just watched the YouTube and sped it up to 1.25 speed so that the pauses in between him speaking weren't as long. And it's something about like his cadence where he's like, space, the final frontier.
Yeah.
I wonder if they broke it up.
Oh, I'm sure
these are the voyages.
Yeah.
I wonder if you played them side by side with
Starship Enterprise.
I wonder if you played them side by side with Shatner and Stewart, like how the cadence would fall out.
You know what's funny?
Well, Shatner's you could drive a boat through, so
that's actually not. That's.
I was kidding.
No, I know, but like
I think I actually did that, and I think Shatner's is a little quicker, and it's not. And when you hear him actually speak, like the words within the lines that get said in like one single what feels like a take, all feel fine, but it's just like whoever was editing it seems like they took each like break and they added just a handful of frames, just enough for it to like nag my brain.
I think it was edited. It was definitely the delivery. I think was definitely edited to the visuals, because the visuals are stunning, and and the inserts, or I'm sorry, the recordings are inserted on the cuts almost, and it's
and so that may be it, and it's just a matter of like, I don't like, me personally, I would rather just end a shot 2 seconds earlier, even if you just love how this particular shot looks, so that the voice lines come out and just sound more natural. But it didn't bother other people, so like, okay.
I do have to say, like, he does get through it a lot faster than Avery Brooks or Kate Mulgrew, though. I mean, they don't even start before the show starts.
But if you listen to the original series, opening narration. It sounds like so old timey, like it was recorded in the 30s when everything was a little bit more high pitched. It's space, the final frontier. These are the origins.
Whoa!
Go get him, boy!
So Ryan, what is the
Hey.
first full circle that you took then?
What is the full? Oh,
Yeah.
I came after watching it the first time. I was put off because to me, now granted, this is the experience of watching it before they released it in episode format. What so it's in a box. You just get to see what it is in a box, and it felt like a trailer, and my brain couldn't predict how it would feel as a standard opening when it was first dropped, and we had those conversations before the first episode
Yeah,
came
that
out.
makes sense.
So it's like it feels like a trailer, and it feels like a fun trailer, but I'm not at the time. I was like
a
I'm
teaser
not
trailer.
I'm
more
not
than a-
Yeah.
right. I'm not buying that this is a standard opening. I have now come full circle.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I just love the show so much that I'll just accept
That always helps.
whatever's put in front of me. I mean, if the show was crap, I'd probably still hate the opening, but it's not the case. So.
Recently, we were in Arizona with Ryan's dad, and he skipped the opening, and we were both like, "Hey,
whoa, John, what are you doing?
Whoa, Mr. Sheely.
You don't skip
All right,
the
well,
opening,
let's a good
Dad."
segue into getting into the actual show itself, because we're going to keep this
Yeah.
to 30 minutes, and we're
A
10 minutes in.
a tight 30 minutes.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, so Ryan, you have expressed a strong opinion for the show itself. So defend yourself.
This show. Look, I'm a sap. Nobody knows. Nobody here doesn't know that.
Nobody knows.
I am an over emotional basket case. When the first episode wrapped, I turned to Tara and I was crying.
It's true.
Like I wept
Yeah.
because finally I had a show that treated Star Trek the way that you can by also pushing it forward, like
But with care.
right.
Like, they took the time.
it is what I hoped Discovery would be, and Discovery is its own thing and its own adventure and a different style of storytelling. But the Star Trek that I fell in love with, that I grew up with, that we all did, was the episodic format, and it is. They treated it with such care and reverence, and at the same time told stories that were socially relevant and well done, and all in the scope of keeping it in and feeling Star Trek. It never felt forced, and I just thought, like when I turned to Tara, like I said, I had tears in my eyes because I was so happy. And then I thought back to Picard season 1, episodes 1 and 2, and I thought, okay, this is a good start.
I was in this before.
This is a really good start.
He looked at me, and it was, tears in his eyes and everything. And I was like, "You liked it, huh?" And he was like, "Yeah, I hope they don't mess it up."
I didn't say mess. But we haven't heard from you, Matt. What
Yeah.
No, I absolutely love it. The fact that they did, go back to the episodic format is very big for me, because that's how I love Star Trek. You can watch any episode of Star Trek, and doesn't matter what the last episode was, you just know, hey, boom, it's Star Trek. That's fine. As long as you know who the characters are, you're good to go. You don't even need to know the characters, really. They're just, hey, that guy's in charge. He's the captain. Go. But at the same time, they do it episodically, but it also progresses the story and progresses the characters through the first season, which is great. And they took the time to set up a lot of stuff that you see, or that we saw in the original series. The whole Chapel having the thing for Spock starts in this, and it's great that it starts there.
I personally found it a little thick on that one.
You think?
I like that it's there, but like I think it's my own personal aversion to television shows and movies just shoving in a love triangle. And it was just like this whole thing, and I was just like, okay. Like
But it was a thing that existed already. It
Oh,
wasn't
totally. Yeah,
like
no,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. This is not me
Yeah.
saying that they shouldn't have done it. Like, I like what they
Yeah.
did, but they just made it
Mhm.
like very in your face about it.
Oh.
And like every time it was brought up, it's like, oh, they're 2 inches from kissing, and they're gonna stand there for 15 seconds.
It wasn't
Okay.
15
It
seconds.
wasn't that
It was
rough.
13 or 12.
Yeah.
Right.
Come on.
So like again,
Travis.
I don't hate the concept of it. I'm glad it was there. I would probably
Mhm.
be critical if it didn't include it in some way, right? Because it is part of TOS and the history of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a little thick. It was
Mm.
like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it, and like that's all you need to establish it, but like it doesn't need to be a thing, and it felt like they were trying to make it a thing.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I see
So,
what you're saying. That makes
but
sense. They could have
It's
pulled back on it a bit.
yeah, I like the idea of including it. I do feel like they're and it's hard, right? Because I can understand the two forces pulling at the writers, but like, yeah, you want to include this, and it makes sense because this is a dynamic that we've already seen. But then if you actually like watch the dynamic as it's played in the original series, it's much clearer as a like Chapel's got a thing for Spock that Spock is completely oblivious to.
Right.
And
Mhm.
that's the dynamic in the original series. And so now if they spend too much time on this, like it's good on its
I
own
mean,
merits.
it already feels like Spock is
They're
interested in Chapel. Like this is clearly
exactly.
like a thing.
Yeah.
My guess is they're gonna wipe it away when he does the ritual to get rid of emotion, and that's why he's like that in TOS. That's my
Oh.
guess.
Well, he never does that.
If you mean Colinar, he doesn't do Colinar until a motion picture.
And he doesn't even
Oh,
complete
true.
it.
Oh.
Correct. So I still,
Yeah.
I still like if I had to bet money, I would say that they're probably going to do something along those lines at some point,
Hmm.
and that'll make it, I think, the one gel into the other. I hope.
Hmm.
Those are my fingers crossed.
Maybe he does like Colinar Light. All
Yeah,
the
well,
loss
I mean,
of
there's
emotion, but half the
Diet
calories.
Colinar.
there's Colinar, and then there's Junior Colinar.
Yeah, yeah.
So you get like merit badges in logic, and
But you don't get your jacket letter until you do varsity Colinar.
Exactly.
He's Vulcan Weeblos.
he's on the JK team.
I have to say, the one thing that I remember tossing this thing to Brian after when it first started, we were only a couple episodes in, and I made the joke about how after the first 2 episodes, I felt like they could have renamed it Star Trek How to Break the Prime Directive. Because like both of the first episodes are very clearly like we're just gonna like they broke the they broke the First Order so badly that they had to rename it in the first episode. and then in the next episode they totally are like, no, we're just gonna move this comet and save the civilization, which I know totally fits within the concept of the Prime Directive and the whole debate about what it covers and what it doesn't. But it was just this like oh, we're doing this again. Okay. And then they didn't even have the debate. They were just like, we're going to ignore that it exists.
Yeah. I mean, I think the really wonderful thing, I think Star Trek Strange New Worlds has really returned to the true roots of Star Trek in the sense that there are multiple episodes where they show up, completely fuck with a planet's entire society, and just then fuck off.
Yeah.
and then the next episode, they're like,
nothing is more pure Star Trek than that basic story idea.
Now let me push back a little bit on that, because in the premiere episode, they addressed it and said that it was because like the only reason that planet had the technology that they had was because
they saw Discovery.
Was
they
the
watched
interference
because they watched Discovery. Yeah.
So
yeah.
And that's another thing that I thought they did really, really well. They have mentioned Discovery exactly once. And it was in a manner that felt natural in the dialogue between the characters.
Yeah.
And they didn't shove it in your face like, remember this?
Remember this?
They did a really good job. And I actually loved that the very first mission was a direct result of the events that happened in Discovery.
Agreed. I thought that was a
without
great
waving
intro.
the flag saying, look at us, our
Agreed.
franchises are connected. They did such a good job with it. And my God. So I fell in love with Anson Mount in Discovery season 2. Is that what it was? Or 3?
Yeah.
Whichever. 2. I mean, he was good then, and he has only continued to be amazing as Pike.
He is the handsomest man ever to put on a Starfleet.
The handsomest man.
Like when he beamed down in between the two arguing factions in what was their United Nations meeting, and he goes, Hi. It was just so
Well,
good.
of course you would love Dad Captain.
Oh, yeah,
Dad
it's true.
Captain.
He is absolutely Dad Captain.
Yeah.
He cooks them all dinner in his ridiculously large
Yeah.
personal quarters.
Oh
Yeah.
god.
His captain's deck.
Like I don't know if it's on purpose, but it feels very much like that is the equivalent of Monica's apartment in Friends.
Yeah.
Where it's like there is no way that this would be what you actually live in.
Yeah.
But okay.
But sure.
And it's like, so we talked before about how, okay, it's the same ship, right? It's the Enterprise. So if those are Pike's quarters, and then we see what Kirk's quarters are in the original series and the massive difference between the two, like something happened and Kirk got screwed in this situation. But now with the season finale episode, we actually like jump forward in time, and sure, it's an alternate universe thing, but we see Pike's
Totally the same.
huge quarters
Massive
in the same
quarters.
year that Kirk would have had his quarters, and so like, what happened, man?
You know,
Like,
maybe
is it
went
like
to
a
Kirk.
Futurama thing where it's like Bender's apartment is the
just a
closet
closet.
is
Maybe
the actual apartment?
Here's the actual reasoning. I believe is they asked Kirk when he took command, "Do you like to cook?" And he says, "No, I don't cook."
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. Screw you. You get these tiny quarters.
Yeah.
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 They
He said,
turned
thank
Pike's
God.
quarters
Pike
into, like-
requisitioned the entire commissary for his
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. They made Pike's quarters like the officer's mess
Yeah.
or something.
So what?
Which
what
I like the meals. So I was gonna
Yeah.
say I went through the wiki and like looked at all the episode things and took some notes about the various episodes. I didn't know if we wanted to dive into each one specifically or just like
Before we do
some things
that,
stood out.
Before we do that, because I do want to do that, let's get your overall thoughts, because we haven't touched on
Me?
you yet.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am thoroughly enjoying the show. I come from a unique background with this particular group of humans because I didn't even start watching Star Trek until my mid-20s. But I have enjoyed different parts of every show, even the ones that you guys say are messing it up royally. And but this one in particular,
I'm on your side, Tara.
right? This one in particular, though, grabbed my heart right away. I've loved every episode, especially the hijinks episode. I know
Body swap.
Oh my god!
The
And
Freaky Friday was the best.
They did it with Katras. It was so good.
I was so like on the edge of my seat, giggling, just like, oh, this is so fabulous. Like, yeah, that I love this show, and I will continue to love this show. And I have never wanted to cosplay a character who is not like super over the top and gaudy and crazy until Una. She's the first one that I'm like,
Yeah, she's great.
ooh, I may just want to be her.
She's fantastic.
I just want to walk around as her for an afternoon.
Yeah, like I'm gonna have to have platform shoes, but still.
I can't wait for the episode where they reveal that the whole Star Trek is actually, it's actually a version of the X-Men, and she just comes to
X-Men.
Picard shows up and it's like, oh.
Picard's in the wheelchair for some reason instead of Pike.
Ray Park is not
that's a
allowed
weird-
on set.
That's a weird crossover. That like
Yeah.
Oh my
I
God.
imagine there's not some fan art of Captain Picard, but as Xavier. There's
Oh, I'm
Is
sure.
Oh no,
There
there's a
must
whole like comic crossover where the X-Men and
Oh,
the Enterprise team up,
I had
and
no
they
idea.
yeah they make at some point a joke about how Picard and Professor X look strangely eerily similar to each other.
That's amazing.
Oh, what's
Well, now I'm
whatever.
gonna
I was
look
gonna
all
I was
that
gonna
up.
tangent, but that's on a completely different show. That's not worth
Yeah.
getting into.
Yeah.
So,
take
let's
notes,
talk about episodes. What episodes did, because we probably shouldn't go through every single one.
Right.
What episodes did stand out for you guys, either in a good way, bad way, sideways?
So I did want to talk about one
There it
thing
is.
before, like any sort of standout. One episode that didn't stand out to me until like 2/3 of the way through, where we get a reveal, was the third episode, which is where everybody becomes addicted to light for some reason.
Oh
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a whole thing. But whatever. Like it's Star Trek.
Yeah,
Who gives a
doesn't
shit?
matter.
Like
Right,
it's fine.
Yeah.
exactly.
But that's the episode in which they reveal that number one is an alien.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what are everybody's thoughts on that whole twist? Because that's not something that existed in canon up
Right.
until this
Correct.
point. So this was a change that we are aware of.
So there are
which
two.
ties into the finale, obviously.
Right.
because-
Right. So there's two big events that happen, I think, in that particular episode. If I'm not mistaken,
What's the
that's the
second one?
episode. Isn't that the episode where we find out about the doctor's daughter being?
Oh yes,
Yes.
it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah. So those two
Those
things.
two revelations.
The episode
Yeah.
itself, like this is one of those episodes where I was like riding the fence, like, do I like this? Do I not? And then I had this psychological switch flip where it was like, wait a minute, I'm watching like not every episode of TNG
It's
is
the new
great.
Naked Now.
Yeah, not every episode of TNG is great. Certainly not every episode of original series. And like just that mindset, like, oh, I don't have to, like, they're not trying to tell a season long story here. This is just a day in the life of, and
Yeah.
like that. Just the fact that they were doing that made me fall in love more with the show. That like it was like, okay, this is an episode that's going to be self-contained and it's going to be weird, but lots of weird shit happens on all the
Yeah.
episodes across all of Star Trek.
Some of the best,
And
worst TNG is weird shit
right,
for one
and
day.
it's like someday, you know.
I have more thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at first I was a little bit pushbacky on it, and but I think that was only because of my inherent hesitancy to appreciate modern Star Trek storytelling, and the fact that I had to be reminded that this was a callback. This was a different form of storytelling, that the way Star Trek used to be done, that I was like, oh wait, no, I'm totally on board. Like, this is totally fine. And I specifically regarding Una and her being an alien, it felt wrong at first, but then we have never seen number one except for the pilot of the cage. So they have
Yeah,
an
we have
entire empty canvas to paint
Yeah.
with. So
Mhm.
What
every
is she
choice they
again?
make is fine. I forget what's the
Is it
species.
Alorian?
Alorian.
Illyrian or something like that.
Illyrian.
Yeah.
So
But it's a genetically modified species.
So I
which
guess
is
my
Right.
forbidden.
initial reaction was, "Oh, that's weird," but they can do whatever they want. I don't have any ties to this character.
Yeah.
I think my concern with it, I'm fine with it conceptual. Like I have no issues with it in terms of canon. I think it's a clever way to try and inject your own story in a prequel that otherwise feels like you have to be very reverent of what you do.
Totally.
Right.
Right.
Like as soon as they said it, it was like, oh, is she now just going to be a Deus Ex Machina at the end of episodes? Like because she can like, is she going to be the Data of this, where like stuff
Right.
just kind of gets solved because of it? And they absolutely do that for that episode because she absorbs a nuclear explosion or whatever
Right.
of light. But
But they don't
I thi-
use that over and over and over.
yeah, I think they do it
Not
one
so
other
far.
time, if I'm not mistaken.
I
But
don't recall it.
I can't
I don't
I can't
know.
remember it off the top of my head. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it hasn't become a thing until the last episode when they arrest her for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought that was awesome. That was an awesome payoff for that
Agreed. Yeah.
choice,
Yeah.
that direction.
And the dynamic of bringing back the other captain from the premiere, the one that Pike has the relationship with, and like
Yeah. Also,
having that
Mhm.
dynamic of like, I'm following orders and this sucks and I don't want to do it. I'm sorry, Chris, but
Yeah.
you know, these are my orders. Like that is so great. Like what's the thing I think that maybe Star Trek and a lot of TV and movies have struggled with in recent years has been like having drama or conflict between two characters or two sides of an issue or whatever, where you can still like both sides can be good people, or you know, coming from some kind of a reasonable standpoint at some point, right? Like, you know, in especially specifically in that whole Una thing, you can like
there were
both
wars.
Una's and Pike's and Captain Battelle, the other captain, like everybody's like, yeah, this
I got it.
everything that they did is like maybe not necessarily what I would have done, but I can see where they're coming from in doing that, right? It's not like, you know, somebody has to do something either like really stupid or really one-dimensionally evil or really, you know, something along those lines for there to be real solid conflict between characters, which I think is just great. And I really hope that like more of that comes out and you know, flowers more in season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It was everybody had a had a reasonable position from the start. like
Yeah.
to do the things that they did, and I thought it was fantastic.
And so, speaking of payoffs specifically from revelations in the light addiction episode, and also ridiculous episodes, the daughter and the transporter buffer, and how that sort of like meandered a little bit through the season, not a whole lot, but then came to fruition in the medieval episode.
As one
Which
of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen on Star
I
Trek,
love
and I
the
loved
medieval
it.
I
episode.
love when Star Trek does that. As soon as
So
it started,
stupid and
and I
great.
think it's because the actors are like, we don't care, we're doing it, and they all
Yes.
ham it up, and you can tell that they're having a blast, and that just makes it so much more fun.
Wimpy Anson Mount is the greatest thing.
Yes.
It's so funny.
Yeah, that episode was an absolute joy. The
Ugh.
payoff of the daughter, it was one of those things where by the time, like, I mean, it's several episodes that we kind of get glimpses of him pulling her out to read her a story and
Yeah.
stuff. And like it had started to reach the point where I was like, she's dying, and if you keep her in the pattern buffer, she will live longer. But you're
Yeah.
pulling her out to read a story, like that's for you, not for her at
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah.
because you're not learning anything more. And that lasted just long enough for me to start being like, and then they got to that episode where it all gets resolved anyway.
Interesting.
So I thought it was good that it didn't drag out any longer, because any more times that he basically was like, she's running out of time, but I'm gonna pull her out for 15 minutes so that I can read her a bedtime story when
Yeah.
she's not gonna know the difference, and they make a point to note that she has no idea
Yeah.
how long she's been in there. And I was like, but then they were like, nope, we're gonna fix it, and they make her a Q or something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I was
Uh, uh,
really pleasantly surprised because I was prepared for that to be a thing where it's like, that's going to be his dark thing for 3 seasons, right? And they're going to be quote
Oh.
running out of time and almost out of time and out of time for 3 seasons.
Mhm.
But no, exactly as you said, they're running out of time, they're out of time, so now they're out of time, and the situation resolves itself in some way, and it resolves itself happily as opposed to unhappy, which is fine, which is good. But just the fact that like they set a thing up and they it didn't feel like they tried to get more blood out of the stone than was there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As an analogy.
Yeah.
They did a thing and then they can now do something else.
Mhm.
And this is another
And
way.
I think that's go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think this is another way where Strange New Worlds really succeeds at being a hybrid, also, because it's not that episode would have been a self-contained episode in any other previous iteration of Star Trek prior
Yeah.
to Discovery. Like
and we've
it would
had
have
that.
it would have been one episode and it would have been wrapped up. But Discovery took a little bit out of this. I'm sorry, Strange New Worlds took a little bit out of Discovery's book and like let it linger and let it feel kind of like what you guys are saying. Like this is going to be a thing for
Yeah.
the entire show, but they resolved it within 4 or 5 episodes,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
without ever actually addressing it directly in a couple of the episodes between the introduction and the resolution. So I thought I was really grateful that they wrapped it up the way they did, because I thought they did it gracefully, beautifully, and as a parent, it was a heartbreaking
It was
episode
hard. Yeah.
to watch. Like, even
Ugh.
though it is a happy ending, it's also a tragic
It's
ending
also
for
a
that father,
really
because he doesn't get to
terrible
see his child grow up to be the person that she actually inevitably became.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I was actually a little I think they went a little J.J. Abrams on it, in the sense of like he has to have that extremely emotional moment of deciding, if you want to go, you can go thing. And then she gets, enveloped and becomes just a separate consciousness and leaves, and you sort of sit with him for like 15 seconds, and then she returns and says, "No, it's been great. This was totally the right decision." And I kind of wish, like, when that happened, I was like, I got shades of Chewie dying in
oh
Rise of Skywalker, and then 30 seconds later, nope, he's alive. It's like
Yeah.
he had to make this heartbreaking choice that, like, he's not going to know whether or not she's happy and what that's like for her.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish that they had let him sort of
let that breathe.
let him feel that loss for like an episode or two, or even longer, and then at some point they run into each other again. But
Ugh.
the fact that it happened instantaneously, like before he even left the room, I was like, oh, that that could have been a really interesting character thing of him going on. I don't hate it. Like I'm not like this was a, but I just was like, oh, this felt very like you could have had a really interesting character thing that could have played out for a little while, and then the relief that would come if you see him struggling with that, whether or not that was the right decision for an episode
Let
or
me
two.
tell you, for me, it was a gift that it happened
Totally
immediately.
understand.
Because I was not
You'd be wrecked.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, don't. Oh, okay, she came back.
But I'm the one that wants to wreck the audience.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like for me, it's like I watch Pixar movies for fun.
Oh god. Oh, you just watch Inside Out over and over again.
Just watch the first 15 minutes of Up and then switch to something else.
God.
You know, Travis,
and then you switch to a Lars von Trier movie.
I switched to the flashback episode for in Toy Story 2 about the.
Oh god.
No.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I wonder if the creators, producers of Strange New Worlds, the writers, had 26 episodes, if that was something that they would have dragged out a little bit. Totally. But because they only have, what was it, 10?
I don't know.
Yeah, 10 total.
Yeah, like that's another thing that Strange New Worlds feels like they have figured out. They have figured out how to tell a complete story,
great balance,
season story arc in 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Like that's something no show has done yet in my estimation, because I truthfully don't believe that any of the modern Star Trek has done it as well as it could be done until this moment.
I mean, you talked about how Strange New World does a good job of carrying character development through it.
Oh yeah.
And I was reminded of the fact that, like, when you actually think back to TNG, which is the one I grew up and first watched and loved, you become attached to those characters and you see sort of some of their character development. But really, if you want to be objective about it and think about how much their characters develop over that time, there's a decent amount of development for a handful of characters that takes place over 7 seasons of 20 plus episodes each.
Mm-hmm.
Versus one thing that I think Discovery did a really good job of deeply diving into characters and letting those characters develop quickly. And that, like you mentioned, this is something that Strange New Worlds sort of pulled from there. Like, I feel like I know the characters in Strange New Worlds much better than I knew the crew of the Enterprise, you know, in TNG until like middle of second season, which is literally like almost 3 times the amount of airtime.
Yeah.
So I think they did a really good job of like really driving into character stuff in a way that they didn't do in the past, which is
no. And I think the show itself has a much better sense of who its characters are, you know, out of the gate, faster than certainly faster than TNG, faster than 100%. DS9 or Voyager as well. Yeah,
that's one of the notes I wrote down here during the discussion. Is chemistry is beyond anything that Star Trek has accomplished.
It's a lot of fun.
So far. Like it's it looks like the character, the actors actually are having just the best time on set, because that shows in the way that their characters are being portrayed, and they're just so good. And like one of the challenges I feel like Discovery has not succeeded through is I've never felt that the words they say show that those characters are close and connected, but I've never felt that. And I feel the relationship between La'an and Una, and Pike and La'an, and the Doctor and Chapel and Spock and Pike. Like all of them are so good. They're just good.
Yeah.
Well, it feels exactly like what I was saying when we were talking about Picard season 2, right? Where there's what I think Discovery has lacked in Picard to a certain extent is this, you know, just this kind of room to breathe for the characters and the personalities that Strange New Worlds has not. And I think the prime example of that is Lon and Una, like doing the thing where like, oh, the ensigns have this weird
the Enterprise bingo
thing. Yeah. This
so
bingo
good.
thing they do.
So
what
fun.
the hell is this? And then just going around and doing it. And like, that was so great. That was fun to just kind of hang out with the two of those characters. It helps that they're both gorgeous women. Lon, please, I will defend Lon's honor for the world. But like that exactly like what we were talking about in the Picard season 2 episode is something that definitely exists, and I think that particular sequence is the best example of it. And I hope they keep pulling on that string some more.
To reinforce that point, I would say when you're describing Discovery and the sort of lack of some kind of feeling those relationships, my mind went to what's the one that I feel the biggest, like, does the best, and it's Tilly and Saru, like those two's relationship. But it's also
Yeah.
because those two are like the best characters that get those moments to breathe. Those are the
Yeah.
only two characters that really are allowed to be characters. You know, you go
Yeah.
through Tilly's like training and some of the stuff that she goes through, and you go with Saru and his trip home, and you
Yeah.
get some back. Like those are the two characters that got that room to breathe, and that's why those two particularly and their relationship with each other feels so much stronger than the
Yeah.
other relationships.
Agreed.
And yeah, Strange New World just doubles down on that by doing it with everyone all the time.
Yeah, until season 4 when they kicked Tilly off of the show for some reason.
Yeah.
But
So
Matt,
I have one
been awfully
nitpick.
quiet.
What?
Yeah.
I'm saying Matt has been awfully quiet.
Oh.
I've just been listening to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we are pretty entertaining. So
Yeah, I mean, everything comes out of Ryan's mouth is diarrhea, but other than that, you guys are pretty good.
Yeah.
okay, so
Check
so
that
I
out.
so I have one like actual complaint, and then I want to talk about. Then I imagine we want to talk about the finale because I feel like Brian
Yeah.
specifically
Well,
wants
yeah.
to talk about the
We are
finale.
Before you
well
get-
over our
bef-
30-minute.
Yeah, before you
Yeah.
get to complaints, because I do have a couple myself, like really nitpicky stuff. But
Okay.
the one thing that I loved from this episode of the Enterprise Bingo was they mentioned the Scorch, and I was like, what the hell is the Scorch? And that payoff of it being like the last deck plating on the saucer section from the original, like that's the oldest piece of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And the fact that they break rules to go sign it, and that like there's a piece of the Enterprise that is signed by crew members from before their time and then theoretically beyond. It was such a, they call it the Scorch because it's
It's a
burned to
great-
hell. It was so good.
Yeah.
I loved
Yeah.
it so
Love that.
much. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that like one of the strengths I think of Star Trek is, I'll always go back to harping on this, that it's like the world building, right? It's like, okay, you create this fantastic world, but how real does it feel that real people are living in this world that is real, right? And like there's aspects of the original series and TNG that feel very much like people who have been in the Navy or the Air Force or whatever, like there's crossover in that sense of like, yeah, I recognize that's what my buddies and I used to do, right? And so there's something specifically about the Scorch that is like, that's absolutely something that would exist on an aircraft carrier or a frigate. Like there's one little plating on the control tower or something on the USS Enterprise or the USS Ronald Reagan or Teddy Abraham, like whatever, that felt like real. Like, okay, this is a fantastic world, but somebody's really thinking about this world
Yeah.
as a real place that real people would live in and giving it that kind of attention. So, all right, we are 15 minutes into our 30-minute episode.
We
discussion.
knew we'd go over quick hits, complaints.
So quick hits and complaints, and then let's talk about the finale specifically.
Yeah.
So Travis, you got your nitpick complaint.
So the one nitpick that I had, I mentioned a couple of the things that I didn't love or thought could have been done better, and those were pretty minor. This one's also pretty minor, except the penultimate episode, the episode before the finale.
We know what penultimate means. Thank you.
We do now.
And now so does our audience.
When they turn the Gorn into xenomorphs for some reason.
Yeah.
The entire episode is so clearly just Alien but Star Trek.
Yeah, but it was creepy.
It was creepy, but it just took me out of it. It was so it didn't feel like an homage because like they even had chest bursters. Like it was so alien to the point that I was like, okay, I get what's happening and everything that's going to happen because you're just following this blueprint that I've seen horror movies and then bad horror movies copy from the good one. And this one was done well, but it just was like, okay, I like the idea of the Gorn being antagonist. It was super cool when they appeared earlier in the show. And then this one felt like a downgrade. It felt very much like they aren't a civilization of brutal lizard people. Now they're just aliens. They're just alien xenomorphs, and that's all they are. That's what it felt like.
They're just
I mean, so the one aspect is like, it was aliens right down to the fact that they had nuked, right? Like they might as well have had that little girl character say they come at night mostly.
Yeah. It was all just very
So on the episode on its own terms, I like to find, it's obviously a total ripoff of Alien, and I'm okay with that. Like, sometimes it's just fun to do that. But I do the criticism I do have for that episode is that it does actually undercut the real point of the original series episode Arena, where we introduced, like, the whole point of the original series episode Arena is that, oh, here's this scary looking monster alien lizard creature that must just be like a monstrous, bloodthirsty beast because of the way he looks. But no, the point of the episode is, oh, he may look scary, but he has his own actual point of view and society and culture, and it's reasonable. It's still, he looks like a monster, but he still has motivations and, for lack of a better term, a humanity that we can recognize and connect with. Like, that's the whole point of the original series episode Arena.
And to some extent, they even still carry that through the first time we see the Gorn, right? They're basically like super predatory Klingons, right? Is sort of the way it's treated when we first see the Gorn, when they set the trap for them and they have to go in the nebula and do the whole thing, which is super fun.
Yeah.
And then this episode, it's like
the alien episode doesn't really,
I see.
go on that level at all. Yeah,
they spit eggs on you, and then you chest burster, and then they scurry around the ship killing things.
Maybe that's just what they do right when they're born. Like, how like human babies are useless little slugs for a while, but they're adorable. Maybe Gorn babies are hyper murderous psychopaths,
And
that kill and eat everything they can, and then as they get older, they develop their intelligence and become a.
I mean, maybe, but it's just not plugged into that episode.
Well, you see, I'll push back on that a little bit, Travis, and say I think it is based on the dialogue that was covered in the previous episodes, where La'an refers to a hatchery. I think, where like the prisoners are kept in a hatchery, where that is where the babies are grown and then theoretically raised. But in this instance, there's no adult Gorn to control them. So like this is not a controlled nursery for Gorn, as brutal and as foreign and as awful as a hatchery of living beings being the hosts for these babies seems to us. To Brian's point, that is just the culture of the Gorn, and that is, they didn't mention that in one of the earlier episodes with La'an, and I felt like the way that I interpreted that episode was, this is what happens if the Gorn eggs are released in the wild and not controlled by, not in a Gorn society.
Yeah.
And so from there it becomes chaos, because they would I don't know. That's the way I looked at it.
Yeah, it's an interesting viewpoint. Yeah, for me, I might buy into that particular viewpoint if it wasn't also so clearly alien.
Oh yeah,
and alien xenomorphs are just
they were doing
killing machines.
They were doing a thing on purpose.
Yeah, and it could be like a genre bending. Like, I'm just too genre savvy because I've seen so many other things, and so like I see it and it's like all the connotations that come with xenomorphs now get sort of projected onto the Gorn for me, simply because they were doing such a clear job of emulating it. And so like it was tough for me to sort of break that and think like, okay, well, these would be less pure xenomorph aliens 2 ripoffs, and ripoffs the strong term, but not meant as that like reduxes.
Yeah.
Homage.
But yeah, so that was the one episode that I was kind of like, all the other ones I thought were super fun and the weird ones were great. This one I was like, yeah, it's a fine, like Brian was saying, it's a fine horror episode and cool, but it just was so tied to Alien and all of the Alien connotations, it kind of like rubbed me the wrong way.
Well, and Predator.
And they killed my favorite character.
Yeah, the little random Predator
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they killed the engineer.
That was unfortunate because I loved him.
Though, why didn't they just take him and put him in the transporter buffer while they figured out how to get rid of the?
Right.
Well, they only have room for one sentient life form in the transporter buffer.
But she wasn't in there.
She was gone.
Oh shit! They had room.
It wouldn't have worked because Anar biology has a particular neutrino frequency carrier wave to it that prevents
the finale. Then.
Yes.
Thanks, Brian.
So how do we feel about the finale?
I thought the finale was awesome. Personally,
I loved it.
I thought it was when I was taking notes while I was watching, because I actually watched it today to make sure I was up to date with it. And so when I watch it, and sure enough, like right when it started, and like Pike shows up in the Wrath of Khan outfit, I just opened up my notepad and I was like, time travel shenanigans, I'm in. Because like I was all about it. It was like, hell yeah. And then tying it back to the time crystal thing, the fact that they sort of did a remix on what is widely considered one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever in existence. And I
Right.
think
Yeah,
that's a tough thing to do. And I think they mostly pulled it off, which
I
is
agree.
impressive in of
Yeah.
itself.
Balance of terror.
In a way that didn't feel like the common time travel trope is the one thing you changed, made everything worse.
Yeah.
And like the one thing he changed didn't come down to the fact that he started the Romulan Federation war. It was because Spock died.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't actually the war that was the problem. It was because Spock died, because Spock is that important. And I was like,
Yeah.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Like that's
I assumed they were gonna kill Kirk. Like when he went,
Yeah,
when
same
his
thing.
ship
I had the
got
same
destroyed, I was
thought.
like, they're gonna kill Kirk, and that's it, because Kirk is instrumental in all this stuff.
And they're like,
you know?
nope,
But
Kirk
nope,
doesn't
nope.
matter.
Screw
For
it. We're
nothing.
gonna completely fuck up Spock. Go.
Kirk's entire life is about keeping
It's what they
Spock
say.
alive.
Behind every good starship captain, there's a great Vulcan science officer.
Yeah.
I read
No.
somewhere that like the whole point of the episode was that the universe doesn't make sense if Kirk and Spock are not together.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like basically, right? What?
But I thought it tied in very well with the stuff that when we talked about potentially doing a panel at DragonCon, one of the things we brought up was how do you tell a story in a world that exists that you love that is still new and interesting? And I thought this really like hit that moment of we're seeing the balance of terror in a completely different way that has to balance the backstory
The
of
terror.
what we know and where it's going. I'm gonna ignore it. And just like it was so fun, and it just reminded me of some of the struggles you've talked about, Brian, in terms of like writing an RPG that wants to include things to reference and future callbacks as they are, but isn't trying to sort of take away what already is out there and leave the stuff that's important and why it's important. And like it's a difficult thing to balance.
Yeah, it is. So that episode did what I think is really hard, and it pulled it off in a way that I don't think much Star Trek has ever, especially not recently, in the sense that like it's what we talked about before, in the sense that if you're going back and revisiting something, so we talked about Picard and his line in Where No One Has Gone Before, where he says, I used to imagine my mother as an old woman offering me tea, right? And so that connects back to that episode, right? So like it pulls on what already exists and adds a new layer to it that makes you look at the original thing from a different perspective, right? It's not just kind of a cheap connection of like, oh, I recognize that term, or I recognize that buzzword, or whatever. It takes something that you know and adds a new layer to it and brings a new color to it. And I thought the way that one line did in Picard season 2, the whole episode, the whole season finale of Strange New Worlds did with Balance of Terror. I haven't rewatched Balance of Terror yet since watching the finale, but like
I want to.
Yeah, me too. It's great, and it's it's just like it's adding something to already, like it doesn't detract from the original that exists in any way, shape, or form, but it still adds something new to it, something new to appreciate, some new layer to kind of peel back, and it's wonderful.
It was so good, and like I have gone back and watched Balance of Terror. I watched it that night or the next night and like,
how did it feel?
Oh my God, it was so good. And like, honestly, I thought there were more direct lines that Spock gave in the Strange New Worlds finale that I thought were directly pulled from Leonard Nimoy's dialogue in Balance of Terror. But a lot of them are actually pulled from Shatner's, from Kirk's. So
interesting.
But everything about it, from the way that like when they first get to Outpost 4 and they make visual contact and there's fire in the background and the guy like turns around towards the camera, it was so good. And when they first tied into the Romulans view screen, I was like, oh my God, please let there be helmets. Somebody wear helmets in the background. And it wasn't immediate, but then later on in the episode, somebody came up and they were wearing a helmet. I was like, thank you, helmets.
Yeah, he said, thank you, helmets.
They did it. It was so good. And Balance of Terror like watching the series finale made me want to go watch Balance of Terror, and watching Balance of Terror made me want to go rewatch the season finale, which I have not done.
That's
I haven't
awesome.
I haven't watched it a second time, but it's like,
And Ryan's just been in this infinite if-then
Yeah.
loop ever
yeah, I
since.
am now in a
Balance of
temporal
Terror loop.
causality loop.
Yeah. Yes.
It's so
Yeah.
good, and
It fills me with hope for season 2. Like it fills me like
Yeah.
they clearly like went all out on this one, and it just feels like, okay, cool. They sort of understand the tightrope they're walking, and they now feel like they've shown that they can do it. And I'm like, yeah, let's get more of this and more
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
soon. So
I will say that I'm still dubious of the casting for Kirk. I
yeah,
could only see Jim Carrey when
Are you just upset that they cast a vampire as Kirk?
I don't know who that actor is, so I don't know what the reference is.
He was in the show called The Vampire Diaries.
Was he? Oh, he's in the Vampire
Yeah.
Diaries. I heard that's
Yeah.
really good. I haven't
Yeah.
seen it. But like I thought he was fine, but the entire time I was only seeing Jim Carrey doing an impression or Jim Carrey wearing a Starfleet outfit.
My brain was going, not Shatner, not Shatner, not Shatner,
yeah.
not Shatner.
The
It's tough.
first line he gives when he's on the view screen is like, James Kirk, Captain of the Farragut. It's perfect.
So-
like
so-
beat to beat, it's Shatner. It's great.
There's actually a moment in I think it's the horror episode where Sam Kirk is like, they land on the thing, and like you just watched the guy who just recently got promoted to lieutenant, which as soon as he had that happen, I'm like, okay, he's dying. And
You're
Lieutenant
dead,
Expendable. Yeah.
but he's down there, and like he does the thing that we've seen 100 times of like, Spock, do you have no emotions? If you go rewatch that scene, he is absolutely just doing a straight Chris Pine impersonation. Chris Pine Kirk impersonation is what Sam Kirk is doing in that scene.
Interesting.
And it's so weird.
I thought Hannah went as soon as she thought that she knew it was going to be Kirk. She's like, "Oh, I hope they get the guy that plays Kirk's brother. Just have him shave the mustache."
Oh, that would have
That'd
been
be
really
the
That would have been
greatest
awesome.
that and get the guy that played Sarek to play the Romulan commander would have been the
Yeah.
greatest.
Yeah.
thing.
Oh,
That's-
the random
that's-
name drop of Spock's brother was fun.
Oh, the Cybok.
Sidebar.
Well,
the
yeah,
Cybok
that doesn't
reference.
even feel like a name drop. That feels like a thing that's gonna come back,
Come
which
back,
I'm
yeah,
like
absolutely.
legit
I'm excited
interested
for
in,
it.
and I don't know how to feel about myself about that. Like,
I mean, I'm more
Everyone-
excited.
Myself about.
I'm more excited about it after seeing the finale and going like, now I think they
Yeah.
can do this. So
yeah, they're gonna. The motherfuckers are gonna pull off Cybok.
I think so.
They're
I
gonna
think
bring
they
back Cybok, and they're gonna pull him off.
And you know what? If anybody deserves redemption, well, that's if anybody, but like the guy who played Cybok, I forget the actor's name in Star Trek V, but he
Lawrence
owned,
Luckenbill.
he owned the hell out of that character. He did everything he could to make that character as good as it could have possibly been, and it's not his fault that that movie was absolutely utterly dreadful. So I for one am grateful for the opportunity to appreciate the Cybok legacy a little bit more, just for that actor's behalf. Because
I know, I agree. I think there's like, I think that's another great. It's another vein, a good story vein to be mined, right? And it's anything that's like a good element in a otherwise, story or episode, movie or whatever that kind of falls short of its full potential is ripe for like, okay, let's bring back that element and try to do it justice, and I think Cybok is a perfect, because it's a great story idea of like, oh, Spock's kind of weird half brother, but who's not like, Spock has spent his whole life trying so hard to be the best Vulcan he could, and then he has this weird random brother that doesn't give a fuck about being a Vulcan at all, right? Like that's such a great idea, and there's so much more potential in it than was actually pulled than mined in Final Frontier itself. So it's a perfect element to pull and like explore more and
we look forward
do more
to when
with.
they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So all of us looking
So
forward
our-
to season 2, clearly.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
and we're
And
hitting our
half-hour
tight
discussion
35.
our half-hour discussion of Strange New World season 1 is now at 65 minutes.
All right,
There we go.
so we'll call it. Close
Yeah,
this out,
so we're
Brian.
gonna wrap this up. We're actually going to do at least one more episode in which we're going to talk about Kenobi, but we're going to make a cut point, so that'll be a new episode. So if you're out there listening to this right now, stay tuned for that, because that'll be coming out in the pike. And then we might do one more Tempest Talks tonight. We'll see. So
coming down the pike.
So for now, fair listeners, thanks for joining us, and until next time, we'll see you out there.